Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Visual Radio Live. It is March 21, 2013, first day of spring, thank God. The views and opinions on Visual Radio are those of the host and his guests, and not necessarily those of the WinCAM, Winchester Community Access and Media, Board of Directors, staff, management, members, viewers, and same with all our affiliate stations, Malden, Brookline, Billerica, Boston, Somerville. Hello, everyone. And here we are. Wide shot, please. My guest tonight, Todd Civin. Hello, Todd.
How are you, man?
Good to meet you.
Good to meet you as well.
Thanks to Jeff Dearman, who's our graphics guy tonight, for introducing us. And thanks to John Gold, Jeff Dearman. Sorry about that, guys. Our director tonight is John Gold. Audio and graphics, Jeff Dearman and Judy Kellerman. So, one letter at a time. This book is written, you with Dick and Rick Hoyt. And explain to us, who are Dick and Rick Hoyt?
Well, those people from Massachusetts and New England probably know Dick and Rick as the father-son marathon team. They'll be running in their 31st Boston Marathon on Patriots Day. Rick is disabled. Rick was born with cerebral palsy as a result of his umbilical cord wrapped around his neck at birth. And Dick is his 72-year-old young father who's pushed him in 31 Boston Marathons, 1,100 sporting events. They're members of the Ironman Hall of Fame in Kona, Hawaii. And they're synonymous, really, with the Boston Marathon.
Todd, when is the next Boston Marathon?
It'll be April, help me here, April 15th, Patriots Day, and 11 in the morning, or 10 in the morning, I think it starts. Dick and Rick start at the front of the marathon with, right after the wheelchair athletes, and of course, Dick pushes Rick for the 26.2 miles of the marathon.
Now, the book is about their journey.
The book is interesting. This is their second book, or their third book. Actually, the first two were written by Dick Hoyt. The first one was called It's Only a Mountain. The second one called Devoted. This is actually written by Rick and myself primarily. And Rick is nonverbal. Rick doesn't speak. So literally, the book was written one letter at a time. The way Rick communicates is you have to go through the alphabet. You break the alphabet into vowels. So if Rick wants to say your name, my name Todd, you'd have to say, Rick, is it an A, an E, an I, an O? Rick would nod his head at O.
Wow.
And then I'd continue to go through the alphabet until he gets the first letter, the word, the sentence. So it took us about 3 years to write it because, as you can imagine, when Rick speaks, it takes a long time to get his message across.
This is fascinating to me. And so he's in a wheelchair. It's hard for him to speak.
He cannot speak. He's nonverbal. The only thing that Rick can control really is the movement of his head. And yet, he's a college graduate from Boston University. He's the first nonverbal graduate of BU, graduated in special education. And as he says, because he has a tremendous sense of humor, it took him 7 years to graduate because he was a bit of a party animal.
That's too funny.
Yeah, and Rick lives independently on his own. He has PCAs who work with him during the day, but at night he sleeps on his own, and he has his own apartment, and he lives independently.
What is a PCA?
Personal care attendant. Personal care attendant feeds Rick, carries him out of bed, puts him in his chair, bathes him, basically does everything for Rick that Rick can't do himself.
Tremendous story.
Yeah, it to me, it's funny. I went to Syracuse, and I graduated in 1983 with my major in communications.
Okay.
And I never went into it. I ended up in the jewelry business. I ended up as a manager of a few different places, and inside of me, I always longed to be able to do what I felt I had talent doing, and to have been a part of this project just fulfills me completely, because it wasn't just writing a book. It was writing a book with Rick and Dick Hoyt, and to do a book with somebody who's unable to speak, it puts your life in perspective. You know, how can you or I ever complain about anything when, you know, Dick and Rick don't complain despite he lives in a wheelchair?
We can complain because each person, like Mr. Spock says, each according to his gifts. We also have our own dilemmas, and we have to go through the journey of life, sometimes with a 2x4 hitting us across the back of the head. That's undeserved, and it just comes out of left field. So each person has their journey. But it's fascinating, and it's very a tribute to them that you took the time to help get the story out and took a nonverbal person and made them very verbal.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
I'd like to explore more about Rick and his father, but let's talk about you for a minute. Syracuse University, you piqued my interest.
Yeah.
Isn't that where, I believe my guest Nelson Slater, who is it, Delmore Schwartz, the famous poet, Lou Reed, the late Ronnie James Dio from the band Black Sabbath and Rainbow, didn't they all come out of Syracuse University?
They did, and I didn't know any of them, but they did. They went to Syracuse. A lot of I went to the Newhouse School, so a lot of the people you see on TV in the sports field especially are Newhouse grads. Dan Roach, who's on Channel 4 in Boston. Give me a second. Sean McDonough, who used to do the Red Sox.
Sure.
Dick Stockton. He was not only a Syracuse grad, but he was in my fraternity. So a lot of the names that you see on TV.
At the time you were in the fraternity?
No.
Okay.
He lived in the same house, but not at the same time I was there.
Okay. Now, for someone like me who's never been to Syracuse, New York, where is it on the map? How close to Canada?
Syracuse is about 3 hours south of Canada. It's about 2 hours east of Buffalo.
Okay.
So it's on the Great Lakes. We averaged 144 inches of snow during the 4 years I was there, which rivals Worcester. Yeah, 12 feet a year they average. The wind comes off of the Great Lakes, and you have snow almost every day from November to April.
Whoa. That's impressive. Now, you've got my interest now, because, you know, Nelson Slater's a dear friend, and he's been on the show twice. We've got to have him on more. But the Velvet Underground, Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground, the first album from Lou Reed and the Velvet Underground with Nico, Delmore Schwartz, the poet, is immortalized on this album. And this whole Syracuse University musical mecca, because who would think Ronnie James Dio and Lou Reed at the same, campus? So why did you pick Syracuse University?
Well, I knew I wanted to go into journalism. I had written for 4 years in high school for different newspapers. I wrote for the New Leader, which is a Spencer small town paper, and I was a stringer for the Worcester Telegram and the Boston Globe. Syracuse, the Newhouse School, is one of the top schools in journalism in the country.
Whoa.
And the reason I went there is because I liked their football team. So it had nothing to do with that. It's just whatever. I'm sure my parents think I went because of the Newhouse education, but I like the football team. So that's why I chose to go there. And I graduated from there, as did my brother, younger brother. He followed in my footsteps. We're both members of the same fraternity. And a few guys from Spencer, where I grew up, have gone to Syracuse since then.
Now, did you talk on the radio station there?
No, I didn't. I majored in newspaper journalism and advertising. Got good grades. I think, though, by the time I got out, I was kind of unsure as to what I wanted to do. New York, which is where the money would have been, was a little intimidating to me. And I didn't find a job right away. And I ended up going to work for my sister in the jewelry business for temporary Christmas help, and stayed there for 13 years. So I knew inside I wanted to write, and I knew I had the talent, but I never stepped up to the plate and took a swing until this happened.
Now, were you in the Boston area?
I grew up in Central Mass, outside of Worcester.
Okay.
So I grew up in Spencer. I now live on the New Hampshire border in a small town called Winchendon.
You're in Winchendon?
Yeah.
Okay, and it's a very nice little town. And so
As little towns go.
Right.
As little towns go.
Interesting story. So now, how did you meet the Hoyts?
Okay, great story in a sense. My job, I was a warehouse manager for a book publishing company in Northborough, and I was laid off. And during my layoff, this was about 4 years ago, about 4 years ago, during my layoff, I started to write to keep myself from going stir crazy. And instead of writing, I wrote sports for a publication called the Bleacher Report. Instead of writing about steroids and escalating salaries, I wrote about sports with heart. So I wrote about a gentleman named Roger Crawford, who I read about in Chicken Soup for the Soul. He was born with no arms and no legs, and yet was a collegiate tennis player. I wrote about that type of story. So knowing the Hoyt story after watching them for years in the marathon, I emailed their office, which is a 2-person office, and their office manager wrote back to me and said, "I'm sorry, Todd, we only do 2 or 3 face-to-face interviews a year." So I was sure I was a sports blogger. I wasn't going to get one of the 3 interviews. But the email continued that we're going to bring you in, and Dick will give you 2 hours, and he'd grant you an interview. So I went to his house, and as I say in the book, I expected to walk into the house and see him with an S on his chest and a cape on his back. But he wasn't. He was wearing a Team Hoyt t-shirt and invited me in the house and told me their story. 2 hours on the dot, they said, "Okay, your time is up." And as I was leaving, I said to them, "There's this new thing called Facebook, and I think you would benefit getting your story out on Facebook. Would you allow me to do your Facebook page?" And so they said, we've always wanted to do Facebook. We think it would benefit us, but we don't have the time. So I took on their Facebook job, and about 2 weeks later, Kathy called me and invited me to a Legends Ball.
Kathy?
I'm sorry, Kathy is their office manager.
Oh, okay.
Invited me to a Legends Ball that Dick and Rick had bought a table. They had 2 extra seats, and there was a sports legend at every table. So Joe Morgan from the Red Sox was there, and a bunch of Patriots were there, and I got to spend the evening with Dick and Rick. It was the first time I actually met Rick, and from the moment we met each other, we're about the same age. I shook his hand. I teased him about how soft and ladylike his hands were, and we became good buddies since then.
Wow. So many of our dreams at first seem impossible. Then they seem improbable, and then when we summon the will, they soon become inevitable. Christopher Reeve.
What I did when we did the book is I took an inspirational quote that kind of tied in with the chapter, and I put it at the beginning of each chapter. The book is interesting too. Rick, because him being nonverbal, it would have taken even longer than it did to write the book. What we did is we summoned people from his past who he'd had an impact on, and many of them wrote chapters in the book as well. Barry Nolan, who used to do Evening Magazine.
Absolutely.
He actually discovered the Hoyts in Albany, New York, before they qualified for the marathon. He did a chapter. Kirk Jocelyn, who's the president of Easter Seals, Massachusetts, did a chapter. Several of Rick's 3rd grade art teacher did a chapter. So what I call the book is it's a book by Rick Hoyt and Todd Civin, and also with chapters by the people he's inspired through his life.
What a tremendous idea. Now, that is a novel idea to me. 3rd grade teacher, then these notables. It gives you a different perspective, different colors of the man's life. So when he was first born, and the parents realized that their child is not going to be like everybody else, not that everybody else everyone has situations. What goes to a parent's mind? What do they...
Well, it's interesting. The doctors said to Dick and Judy, "Put your son in an institution. He's never going to be anything more than a vegetable."
Oh.
And part of Dick's speech to this day is we're still trying to figure out what vegetable Rick is. The parents
have to come back with something clever because that's just cruel.
Absolutely, and I'm not comfortable with the word vegetable, but they are. So you know what? They can use it. But they said, you know what? We're not going to do that. We're going to take Rick home and we're going to treat him like any other child. And I will tell you, they did. Rick, there's stories in the book that Dick used to put Rick up on his shoulders and he carried him up Mount Monadnock. And Rick had two brothers after that, Rob and Russ, who were able-bodied and not disabled. And the story goes that Dick was carrying Rick up on his shoulders. Someone was coming down the mountain, saw him, and said to Russ and Rob and Judy, who were a little bit further down the mountain, you shouldn't go up there. There's a man who's going up to sacrifice his dead son up at the top of the mountain. But they taught Rick to swim. There's videos on YouTube of Rick playing hockey. They would tie a hockey stick to his wheelchair and he'd play goalie. And it's the way that the Hoyts treated Rick that I'm sure led to the fact that he was able to live a life as an independent adult. As I said, he went to college, and there's a quote in the book that I think really sums it up. And I don't know if I have it verbatim, but it says basically, the doors that the Hoyts kicked in, knocked down, ran through, remain open so that other disabled people will find a welcome mat waiting for them today. And that's really what their story is. Their story is more than a running story. Rick was, this is really interesting. I'm going to say early 1970s, I did a term paper. I was probably 13 or 14 years old. I did a term paper on Chapter 766, which is a Massachusetts statute that allows disabled people in our public school classrooms today. Little did I know that it was Rick and Dick and Judy Hoyt that were instrumental in getting that law passed.
We call that synchronicity.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So the doctors treat someone with what they see as being a person they consider being an invalid as almost less than human. Mm-hmm. To put them in an institution, let's just ignore them and not give credit to the human being, the individual inside, who probably is very bright. I mean, look at Professor Stephen Hawking. Now, you have musicians out there playing in clubs night after night. And I went and saw Professor Stephen Hawking at the Wang Center. And I'm thinking, here's an individual in a wheelchair packing an auditorium that most musicians would like say, how do you put 3,400 people in here? And just with his intelligence, he was able to command that kind of an audience. So we as a society, I think we're starting to get a little enlightened and maybe realize each individual has, like Mr. Spock said, each according to his gifts. That to me is, the new kind of age of Aquarius, if you will. Mm-hmm. And thank you for pursuing the story further because, as you said, there's 2 books out already?
Yes, yep. 2 by Dick. Dick actually, first book, It's Only a Mountain. Second book was called Devoted, and that was with Don Yeager, who's a Sports Illustrated writer. That's his more recent book, but this is Rick's first book. Rick also has a children's book out that isn't written by him, but about him, and it's a way to get children to accept disabled people as being like themselves as well.
Now, we're talking to Todd Civin, who is co-author of One Letter at a Time, and what's the Facebook page?
Well, the Hoyts have several Facebook pages. We have one called One Letter at a Time, and also the Hoyts Facebook page is the official Team Hoyt Facebook page.
And is there a website, a main website?
The Hoyts have a website, teamhoyt.com.
Uh-huh.
And then I have a website where the book is sold, civinmediarelations.com.
So if people go to the Hoyt site, they can basically go and have fun with all the free stuff we talk about, which is the Facebook, the Twitter, and all that.
Absolutely.
Okay, do you handle the Twitter accounts?
They don't have a Twitter account, actually. They have Facebook, they have LinkedIn, they don't tweet.
Okay, now LinkedIn is more for professional stuff. Twitter, I'm just starting to have fun with Twitter. I have two Twitter accounts, Visual Radio 1 and Joe Viglione. And I'm just starting to get the grasp of it because, I have to do the Facebook for the TV show. So now we're doing the Twitter. We're twittering away. And
Tweeting, yes.
Tweeting, but in twittering I call it too, when I do the following and some people are following me and you follow 5 and then 5 more follow you. It's kind of fun seeing in your mailbox, oh wow, so-and-so's following you. And it's pretty amazing. I reviewed Andrew Garfield in the Spider-Man movie and then had Andrew Garfield following you, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah. It's really the way a lot of news is being broken now. People, instead of reading the newspaper or going online, they're seeing the reporters are at games or the reporters are at events, and they're reporting live, up-to-the-minute activity. So the book, you go on the Facebook page and you have fun with the Facebook. I think, doing a little tweet on Visual Radio, it fascinates me. It's just this little succinct thing, and it has so much power these days. Absolutely. Who would think in 140 characters you can get the message out?
And it's a discipline, too, because you have to kind of like hack away. It's like, oh, God, I'm -3. Take out this word, shorten this. And then you get that discipline and you do it and you punch them out there. When did Dick's first book on mascot books come out?
Well, Rick's is the one on mascot. Dick's were, I don't actually know the publisher on Dick's books. One Letter at a Time came out in August.
Of last year?
Correct. And go ahead.
So it came out last year.
Exactly. It's doing very well. It's on Amazon. It's on Barnes & Noble. Dick and Rick appear at a race every weekend pretty much, so they sell all 3 books at their races. And the beauty of that is they'll autograph them, they'll personalize them. It's funny, when the book first came out, I was starting to get sales from everywhere.
Well, I'd rather not talk about sales and stuff. That's not our thing is more like the content of the book.
Got it.
We are non-commercial television, so I don't ever want to delve into those areas. But you have fun having lectures.
Yes. They do public speaking. Dick and Rick go out. Dick travels the country. Rick doesn't travel as much as he used to, but Dick travels to corporate events and to races, and he does a motivational speech telling their story. A big part of it is on YouTube. They have a video that when it first came out, it's to the song I Can Only Imagine by Mercy Me. And they didn't really know YouTube. They didn't use it that much, but they started getting millions and millions of hits on this video. I think right now it just hit 20 million hits on the Dick and Rick Hoyt Mercy Me video.
What I'd like to talk about next is the cover. And it's a beautiful picture of a beach. And there's Rick Hoyt on the beach looking forward, not looking at the book, but he's looking forward and you see him from the back. Who came up with the concept?
It happened by accident. This was Cohasset Beach, and one of his PCAs, Jessica, took him to the beach. We were working on a cover. We really didn't know what we were going to do, and what we had kind of put together was a collage of many different of the Hoyt's pictures. And then Jessica sent this picture to me. I run their Facebook page, and she would often send me pictures of Rick and his daily activities. She sent me that picture, and I knew at that moment that was the cover. And I bounced it off a few people, and they said, it would be better if you saw his face, or it would be better, people might not recognize him. And I disagree. I think that the picture is indicative of Rick looking out and thinking about life. And many parts of the book are Rick's viewpoint on life. I took Rick to a Worcester Sharks game. We were watching hockey. Rick loves hockey. I took him to a game, and we were watching as fans. And next to us we were sitting in the wheelchair section, and next to us was a group of people in wheelchairs who, I'm going to use the expression, were far more disabled than Rick. And I could see him look over at them and kind of think about them. So after the game, I said, Rick, I said, I noticed you were looking at those people. What were you thinking about? And he said to me, Todd, he of course spelled out to me, he didn't say to me, he said, Todd, I was thinking about how lucky I am and how those people who were at the game didn't even really realize that there was a hockey game going on there. And there's things that, it alludes back to what you and I said at the beginning. It puts things in perspective. Here we are thinking that, Rick has life so terrible, and yet when he compares his life to other people, he realizes how lucky he is.
Well, let me ask you, did you go to his apartment to do any of the research?
I go to his apartment quite frequently.
Why would someone want to live on his own? Why wouldn't he want to live with his parents or with friends?
Because he can live on his own. It's the same as an 18-year-old, I wanted to live on my own. And I think what Rick does is he tries to prove a lot to himself, and he's a trailblazer. He wants other disabled people to feel better about themselves and to know that they can live independently as well. And it hasn't always been easy. There's a story in the book, Rick was living on a third floor, I think a fifth floor apartment in Boston, and he has a waterbed. Now, when Rick is placed in the waterbed, the PCAs place him in at night face down, and then they leave for the evening, and he can't roll over. The waterbed sprung a leak, and the neighbors downstairs reported to police that the waterbed's leaking. Dick lives in Holland, Mass., which is out near Sturbridge, and by the time he got from Sturbridge to Boston, the waterbed was near empty of water, and there was Rick still laying face down in the water.
In the water?
Well, he didn't drown, but they did have to take him to the hospital. And when they took him to the hospital, people didn't recognize Rick and Dick at first, and they started treating Dick as if he had brought in an abused person. Oof. And of course it wasn't. It was Rick with cerebral palsy.
Now, which is exactly, my perception that, wow, if you're living with another disabled person, then you have that safety net. Does he have other disabled friends? And I hate using the word disabled. No, he really doesn't.
But he's disabled. He has disabled people that he associates with. There's been a lot of offspring from what the Hoyts do. So there's actually a running group in Virginia Beach called Team Hoyt Virginia Beach, and they're disabled. They call them angels and captains. The captains are the people in the wheelchair. The angels are people that push them. And then there's that Team Hoyt Virginia Beach is the only group that's named after the Hoyts. There's about 15 other groups around the country called My Team Triumph, and they do the same thing. And in May, I think this May is the third year, all the people from Team Hoyt Virginia Beach, My Team Triumph, get together at the Hoyts' house. They have a barbecue at the Hoyts' house, and they run a race in Holland, Mass. And it's amazing to see the number of disabled athletes who look up to Rick because he's their idol. And so he has a lot of disabled friends through running.
Now, Todd, in Malden, Massachusetts, there's something called Malden Access Television, MATV. Friends of ours, Ron Cox, the executive director, has been here on the show. Dave Gauthier, our executive director, worked with Ron up in Salem, so we're all a big, happy family. Able Vision are people who have abilities. They don't call themselves disabilities. Able Vision is people with abilities who we would consider disabled, but they consider themselves with abilities. I think Able Vision would be a great place to bring this story.
I would love to.
And that's in Malden, and they're an award-winning show with people who have special abilities, because the public perceives some of us in life as having disabilities, or maybe they see me and you and we're walking jollily and happily and, oh, these guys have nothing to worry about because look at these people who need a crutch or a hearing device, or, it's an interesting world. Like I said earlier, the age of Aquarius, there's enlightenment now. Do you get discouraged when you turn on a radio station and they're like anti-PC? Oh, why do we have to be PC?
I don't know if I get, I believe in political correctness. I've found, and it's in hanging out with the Hoyts and getting to know them, they don't use the word normal. And I think earlier in the show, you and I were both speaking and trying to say the word normal without using the word normal. What is normal? It's what we know. I guess to answer your question, I think that people who are differently abled, they face a lot of pitfalls in life and a lot of challenges. And I think as a society, we do have an obligation to treat them with the same type of respect that we would expect to be treated ourselves. I have several friends who are little people. They're not midgets, they're little people. And if that's what society, if that's what they want to be called in society, I think we have an obligation to call them that in society. Be it religion, be it, I guess some people think it goes overboard with the holiday season. Is it called Christmas? Is it called Hanukkah? Is it called the holidays? But I guess I was brought up in a politically correct way.
Right. I guess maybe that one is a hot button issue, having the hello out there in TV land. Thank you. Having that Christmas and Hanukkah and all that, maybe that goes to an extreme, because Christmas is Christmas, but I get it. I do get it. But the little people, now here's a good example. Broadcast Music Inc., BMI, ASCAP, CSAC, they police all the radio and TV stations for people playing music, and then they pay the songwriters that have songs out there in the world. And when they go to Congress, to fight for the right to charge big stores and corporations that are playing music, they say they're going there for the little songwriter. Do you know who the little songwriter is?
I don't.
I've been writing songs for my whole life, and I'm one of the little songwriters because I haven't broken the top 40 with a hit record. So anyone who hasn't had a hit record, no matter if you've written songs that have been put out all over the world, I had a record deal in Paris, 4 albums came out. My albums are in a lot of people's homes around the world, thanks to the French record company, and they still have this demeaning term, the little songwriter. And I've written to them and I'm saying, how can you be so, not only are you being politically incorrect, demeaning your members, the membership of this organization, calling us the little songwriters, but you're not giving us credit for the hard work we put in. And the other thing is, you're going and lobbying Congress, which benefits basically the big songwriters.
Absolutely.
And so it is important to get politically correct and understand that people are sensitive and they're proud of their work, and to demean Rick Hoyt's efforts or to demean my efforts as a songwriter or your efforts as a journalist, it's just not fair, because if you're judging a quality of a work on if it sold 1 million copies or how well it's written, to me it's how well it's written in the storytelling. And just from you sitting here, this is a really unique and important story, and I'm glad you're here as our guest tonight.
Thank you.
And I thank Jeff Dearman out there who's taking a photo of us right now. I thank Jeff Dearman for his diligence in finding great guests. We have a very talented staff here. John Gold, our director tonight, working on his projects. Jeff Dearman working on his music closet, which Jeff Dearman has excellent taste in music. He brings in people from different states, and they come here just for Music Closet.
Love it.
It's totally tremendous. We've got about 20 minutes, 19 minutes left. We're going to talk to Frank Dell'Ostrito. You're going to come back and talk to us more about this book.
Absolutely.
And we have another book that you have that's coming out in 2 weeks.
Yeah, it'll be out the 1st of April.
And that is?
It's called Destined to Run. And it's, the way I kind of think about it is, remember TV sitcoms a few years ago? You had All in the Family,
yep.
And from All in the Family you had the spin-off, you had the Jeffersons,
yep.
You had Maude, etc. Well, I met a runner at last year's marathon with the Hoyt. His name is Wes Harding. He was a member of the 30-person Team Hoyt marathon team, and he's from Sarnia, Canada, Sarnia, Ontario, and he's a spin-off. So Team Hoyt selects their team members for their marathon based on stories that they've written to the Hoyts that tell their story. And Wes's story is he was a couch potato, weighed about 225 pounds, and he had no physical activity whatsoever. He was age 40, and he decided he wanted to get off the couch and make a better self. And in 4 years, he ran a marathon. He ran the Boston Marathon, and he recently became an Ironman in Lake Placid. The Ironman competition is where you run or you swim 2.3 miles, you bike 110, and then you run a 26-mile marathon.
Whoa.
Harry was a 225-pound slug, and in 4 years he did that.
Hey, Jeff, could you get the door and shut it? Thanks. We're very laid back here at Visual Radio. I just like to just keep it very loose. And
I love it.
I think, it's public access television, so people can get to hear, and know who the people are working with us to create this programming, which is very important.
Doesn't happen without them.
Destined to Run, it's funny, you bring up Maude and, of course, the Golden Girls and all these spin-offs, and one wouldn't think of spin-offs of an athletic sort, but here we have it. The website is teamhoyt.com, teamhoyt.com. You can get to the Facebook, and you can get to this fascinating story, which I'm thrilled that you're here tonight talking to us about it. So when Dick, the father, is running, he's got to be in great shape to not only run a marathon, but run a marathon with his son. So the logical question is, running and pushing, how hard is that for the father?
Well, I imagine he's done 31 Boston Marathons. So when he was, he's 72 now. When he was 41, it wasn't quite as hard as when he's 72. But the Hoyt's record for running in a marathon is 2 hours and 45 minutes. Now, if you do the math, that's about a 6-minute mile for 26 miles, pushing a 100-pound, 110-pound man. The mathematics that I do, and this is really amazing, the average triathlete weighs about 120 pounds, and his bike is about 17 pounds, is 137. Dick weighs 170, Rick weighs 100, and because their bike has to be heavier, their bike is about 70 pounds. So they're pushing 340 pounds, while the average triathlete is pushing, whatever I said, 150. Double. So Dick and Rick's times has definitely slowed down over the years. The past 2 marathons, last year, if you remember the Boston Marathon, it was about 90 degrees. So unfortunately, their time, well, they say unfortunately, it would still be great for me, but they ran it in about 6 hours last year. But their record is 2:45. There's also an amazing story in there. Dick and Rick ran across the country. They did it as a fundraising opportunity, but they ran from Santa Monica Pier in California to Boston. And they did it in 45 days, which means they averaged about 90 miles a day running and biking. Now, most people said to them, if you're going to do this, you have to take time off in between, but they didn't. They ran every day. They felt that they would get stronger as they went around across the country. When they finished on the 45th day, and that day there was a Red Sox game. And the Red Sox invited them to throw out the first pitch at Fenway Park.
Together.
So they ran through the Green Monster. They ended up on the pitcher's mound. And Dick wanted to give a few-minute speech, and they said, you can have 3 minutes. And Dick said, what can I say in 3 minutes? And they said to Dick, well, if you give a speech and you say that Fenway Park is handicapped friendly, we'll give you 5 minutes. I don't know if you've been to Fenway Park, but it's not too handicap friendly. But they gave him 5 minutes. They told their story to the cheers of the crowd. The next morning, you're not going to believe this, next morning they went up to Fairleigh, Vermont and ran a triathlon.
Whoa. Now, people out there in TV land, the book is one letter at a time. In the back, personal biographies of the authors, which I really like. It's little one-paragraph essays on Barry Nolan, Annie Mason, Brian P. Lyons, Dick Hoyt. Fascinating. And there's some wonderful pictures. Wonderful, wonderful pictures. I'm very impressed. This is great work. Todd, I'm so glad you're here. Just a couple of final questions. Where's Dick living?
Dick lives in Holland, Mass.
Where's Holland?
Holland is on the Connecticut border. It's near Sturbridge.
Oh, so it's near Sturbridge.
Yeah, he lives 2 towns away from Rick.
Oh, but Rick was living in Boston.
Rick lived in Boston when he went to BU.
Oh,
and now he's living in Sturbridge in his own apartment.
Okay, so he's not too far from the father.
Nope.
And the mother.
The mother's passed away, but Dick lives with Kathy, who's also his office manager. They're boyfriend and girlfriend.
Oh, okay, so she runs the office, and this is a fascinating story. We're gonna talk to you again when the new book comes out.
Love it.
You can bring the author, right?
He's from Canada, but I'll get him down here.
Oh, we can talk to him on the phone. You can
Absolutely.
phone in. And if you don't mind now, we talk movies. Do you like movies?
I like to watch them.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna ask our directors out there if we can keep the phone central somewhat. You can do some flipping back and forth, but I think it's good to keep the long shot for Frank Dell'Ostrito. Now we have a film critic, Frank Dell'Ostrito. What film have you seen lately?
Oh,
What's
see, that's why the one I most recently saw was. Give me a second. Well, I'm going to be embarrassed to say it, but I saw all the Twilight movies because my wife is a big vampire person.
Don't be embarrassed.
Okay.
They're great movies.
It's kind of a chick movie, isn't it?
No.
Okay.
No, we'll talk about that.
All right.
We'll talk about that, Twilight.
I can't think what the most recent one I saw. I'm just, drawing a blank.
Frank Dell'Ostrito talking about movies.
Hey, Frank, I'm here with author Todd Civin. He's got a couple of books out right now and a couple more coming out. We're just on the Twilight Saga. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to inject something into the conversation, then you can respond and Todd can talk to you. Todd just said, isn't Twilight a chick flick? My wife likes them. Frank, does your wife like them?
My wife and I saw the first one. We thought it was okay. We saw the second one, and after that we weren't interested. So it is from what I've seen, it's a chick flick for young chicks. I thought it was quite popular with the younger women, but I'm an old man now. I don't have that many close friends who are young women. But chick flick, no, I wouldn't say so. I think from what I've seen, what I've read, who I've talked to, I think young men as much as young women are into it, but for different reasons. It was not aimed at my demographic, and guess what? It didn't get my demographic.
Well, you're right, because I liked the first one a lot, and I really didn't, after the second one, maybe the third, I don't know, I know I saw the second. It did lose my interest, but the first one I thought was a classic vampire movie.
Well, here's a change that has gone on, and when I was, I grew up with vampires and werewolves and all that. They were always loners. I mean, these were, you could say they're serial killers. They are the outcasts of society, but they're loners. And today's undead brings with them a whole subculture. I mean, they belong to a family, and the family's an episode is in the first movie. In the second movie, you find out it's not just a family; it's a whole underground nation, who, by the way, has their headquarters in the basement of the Vatican, as I recall. And so that's a whole different approach to what these mythical figures are, and it's not one that appeals to me, but I know it appeals to some others. So. You can have Bela Lugosi sleeping alone in a castle in a coffin, or you can have Robert Pattinson with his family moving around the Pacific Northwest. It's a matter of taste. I like my monsters to be loners. That's the they resonate more with me than these subterranean societies that are out there.
Well, back in the day,
that's where the undead have been going for the last 15 years or so.
Back in the day, it was creepy to have Night of the Living Dead as opposed to The Walking Dead. What do you think, Todd?
No, I agree.
Yeah, do you watch The Walking Dead?
I'm not a big horror guy. I'm a chick flick guy, and that's why I thought Twilight was a chick flick, but maybe my wife has me brainwashed. I'm not really sure.
Again, I've read. Again, this is not my age group, so I can't say. But from what I've read, from what I've heard, I thought there were young men who were really into it.
I feel better about myself.
Young men don't get into the movies the way young women do, because when they relate to the woman and they're attracted to the man, that's a powerful tonic for them. No, I think Todd's wife has something. I don't think that's, you can be a chick flick among other things. It became a love triangle. It was a love triangle in the first film. It became Taylor Lautner. The girls I have talked to were more attracted to the young werewolf than they were to the young vampire. But that might have been their personal taste. No, I think Todd's wife is right, but I wouldn't say that's the only appeal the movie had. But you're talking to the wrong guy, Joe. You got to get somebody else who's closer to that.
No. We just brought it up. We're talking about all sorts of movies tonight. One of the big chains is going out of business around here, and probably know which one it is. And I picked up Source Code. I picked up the DVD and the Blu-ray of Source Code, the Duncan Jones movie we might have discussed a couple of years back, right?
Yeah, Source Code. That who's the star again?
Jake Gyllenhaal.
Yeah, I remember it well. Yeah.
Now, I think David Bowie's son is the director.
Okay.
And we interviewed Duncan Jones for the show in Boston when the movie came out, and didn't have the heart to tell him, Duncan, I was with your dad, David Bowie, when you were 4 years old. We were at the Springfield Marriott with David, and I would think that David has got to be very proud of his son being able to make these movies on a decent budget and turn a profit with both of them, Source Code and Moon.
Well, and aside from turning a profit, I didn't know whether it turned a profit or not. I thought Source Code was a very fine movie.
Yes, and if you think about it, the set is beautiful. It's a train, but they keep using the same set like the Honeymooners, only in a very creative way. So it keeps that mystique. Now, the Quantum Leap is running on was it Spike after the Bond movies? Bond movie marathon going on. Are you watching that?
I'm not watching that particular one, but I
Living Daylights last night, sir.
I watched plenty of Bond movies in the last year because of the 50-year anniversary, but no, I haven't been watching the Bond movie marathon.
Yeah, and Skyfall did over $1 billion, so the biggest selling Bond movie of all time just came out. But my point is that Quantum Leap is on after the Bond marathon, like tonight. I saw Living Daylights last night and then Quantum Leap. And in Source Code, you've got Scott Bakula as the father to Jake Gyllenhaal because they wanted to throw the Quantum Leap into a Quantum Leap movie. So that was pretty good. Okay, on to my next question for Frank. Oz. Have you seen Oz?
I have seen Oz.
And your thoughts?
Okay, my wife loved it, and I think because she saw it as a duel between women. I read your review, which is withering. I hope I never make a movie that you don't like. Because you write a great damning review.
And I was being nice. I really was being nice.
Yeah.
Withering?
Okay, I have trouble believing that because it was. I probably wasn't down on it that much, but I didn't like it, and I think the weak center of the movie for me was James Franco. He just had none of the. It's kind of like with the Star Wars prequels. I saw that little kid, Anakin Skywalker, growing up to be Darth Vader. You just didn't see him in there.
You read that in my review, or we're in sync?
Oh,
No, we're in sync. I agree. Hayden Christensen, forget about it.
Yeah.
Oh, you meant the little kid, the little kid.
Yeah.
Oh, that was awful, too. Oh.
And I never saw Hayden Christensen growing into him either. Maybe I read that in a review. And but I never saw the Wizard in James Franco act. But James Franco's, I thought the whole concept of the character, not just his performance, but I thought the whole concept of the character was a little out of whack. Now, if he's listening to this, he's laughing because the movie, of course, is making money hand over fist. So who cares what we think? But
no, you know who the first choice was, right?
You're always asking me questions I don't know.
All right, Sam Raimi, the director, wanted Robert Downey Jr.
That's right. I heard that. Because there is I can see Robert Downey Jr.'s screen persona becoming the wizard that I know from Wizard of Oz. Now, I feel a little guilt in all this because it's certainly not the actor's fault that you have a strong image of a character. and if they try to change it, you tend to rebel. For instance, the two Hitchcock movies. Apart from the performances that the two actors gave this year as Alfred Hitchcock, Alfred Hitchcock was someone that came into my living room every week from the time I was 5 on the Alfred Hitchcock, and I had that in my head, and I see these two actors, and they tried to make them look like them. I thought they did a terrible job making them look like them, but how they just can't pick up that persona, and so it is with the Wizard. I've been watching the Wizard, every year since I was a kid. I have a very strong image of Frank Morgan's Wizard of Oz, and I just couldn't see him and James Franco. That's not James Franco's fault. That might be my fault, but it didn't work for me. But aside from that, I thought the movie was too long. They could have easily cut a half hour out of it. Too much going on, but too little to say. If I had your review in front of me, I would read it because I thought it was a great review to read.
Well, thank you very much.
I enjoyed your review much more than the movie.
Well, and my point in the review was this. They start going into song and dance, and I am not a show tunes guy. Yeah. Do you like show tunes?
I do not.
Okay, so Todd, who likes chick flicks, and I'm not averse to chick flicks, but I'm not a show tune guy. I haven't seen Chicago yet, probably never will. But The Wizard of Oz is a musical. And as a musical, you expect the Munchkins to be singing, and they're singing, and James Franco makes them stop, and it just takes the air out of the movie because the movie is told in song as we've been brainwashed all our lives. That's my opinion, Frank.
No, you have a strong. You watch the TV reruns. I watch reruns of Seinfeld every week. If Michael Richards comes on as anything but Kramer, it's hard for me to accept it. Yeah. No reflection on what he's an actor. It's probably just the opposite. He's made such a strong impression, but it's an impression that is reinforced every night, year after year. And then, it's like your Uncle Charlie, who you grew up with, coming in and said, hey, he's not Charlie now, he's somebody else. And you say, oh, I'm sorry, he's always going to be Uncle Charlie.
It's Bewitched is the same thing, only they kind of did it maybe, it wasn't as egregious. Yeah. But I do have a point to make about all this. Robert Downey Jr. did have a drug problem, I believe. That's well celebrated.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Frank Morgan, they said, used to bring alcohol onto the set of The Wizard of Oz, and he was drinking on the set. So that being said, one of the critics did defend Franco and say that it was very difficult for him to do the green screen to all those amazing effects, and maybe that's part of it.
Maybe. I wouldn't cut him that. I would cut him that.
Yeah. You're right.
He's trying to recreate a character, have a very strong image of, and it's just not something it's just not his persona and Frank Morgan's persona on screen are nothing alike. And asking a viewer to make the connection. Now, younger viewers are out there who maybe aren't as familiar with the film, saying, "Well, I made a connection fine." Again, I told you, my wife had no problems with it. She liked it, but she saw it more as a woman's movie. But I just thought James Franco was a weak center to the whole thing.
You're right. And you know what? I think we're too much of purists. We have too much of that purity. And I think maybe Sam Raimi's a genius and is reaching out to the new generation in a way that maybe they want McDonald's and they don't want to have a wonderful, expensive dinner. I don't know.
Well, I hate to sound like an old man, but the styles of movies change. Like I was writing an article on 1930s movies, and for about 3 months, all I watched was 1930s movies. Then I started watching one from the 1940s, and I didn't like it because the pace had kind of changed. And the same with today's young viewer. The young viewers have been raised on movies where they have to hook you in the first 30 seconds. There, the action movies start with this tremendous action scene. Then they watch a Hitchcock where it takes 10 minutes to build up to something, and they're bored stiff.
Well, Frank, I'm glad we got to talk movies tonight, and we might do it again next week. I think I might pull a segment out where we can just talk movies. That's pretty much our show for tonight.
Goodbye, Joe.
Frank, thank you very much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Frank Delastrito, he has done a biography on Bela Lugosi over London, A Vampire Over London, Bela Lugosi in Europe. That's our show for tonight, people. This is Visual Radio Live with my guest, Todd Civin. I want to thank Judy Kellerman, Dave Gauthier, Jeff Gold, Jeff Dearman, John Gold. It's the Jays. I'm Joe Viglione, your host. You can check out visual-radio.net and communitymediamedford.com. Thank you very much. The views and opinions on Visual Radio here on March 21st, 2013 are those of the host and his guests and not necessarily those of WinCAM. Thank you, John Gold. Thank you, Jeff.